Welcome to the Mid-Atlantic Water Quality Program training module on bottled water awareness. The partners involved in developing this module are listed on this slide. The following individuals contributed to this presentation. After viewing this presentation, participants should be able to discuss the differences between tap water and bottled water, define the most common types of bottled water, understand the basic regulations that apply to bottled water and the types of bottled water certifications that exist, understand how to interpret the information on a bottled water label, and appreciate the cost and environmental impacts associated with bottled water consumption. Some consumers choose to buy bottled water because they perceive it to be safer than tap water. Rather than assuming it's safer, we suggest that you educate yourself about bottled water and how it compares to other sources of water. For those reliant on a public or municipal water system, the easiest way to learn more about your drinking water quality is to read the annual water quality report distributed by the water treatment facility. The EPA regulates the quality of public drinking water under the Safe Drinking Water Act by enforcing standards for about 90 contaminants in drinking water. All violations for contaminants will be listed in this report so the consumer can understand the quality of the water provided. About 45 million Americans rely on private water systems such as wells and springs. Unlike municipal water, the owner of a private water system is completely responsible for maintaining his or her water system. One way to ensure a private water supply system is functioning properly is to test the water regularly. Tests should always be done by a certified lab. Periodic inspections by a licensed well driller are also strongly recommended. For more information, you can visit the Virginia Household Water Quality Program site at www.wellwater.bse.vt.edu. The source of bottled water can vary from springs or wells to municipal water systems. To learn about bottled water quality, read the label, call the company who packages the water, or visit the company's website. The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, regulates bottled water as a food and has set standards for over 70 contaminants. Companies are required to test for many of the same contaminants tested for in municipal water supply systems. The FDA has determined that some contaminants are not a concern in the bottled water industry. Bottled water is often perceived to be healthier and cleaner and to taste better than alternatives, but this may not always be the case. Reading the label of bottled water is the best way to familiarize one with its source, contents, and treatment methods. Bottling companies regulated by the FDA must indicate the source of water on the bottle. This slide lists and defines regulated standards of identity commonly used in the bottled water industry. These include artesian water, groundwater, purified water, mineral water, sparkling bottled water, sterile water, spring water, and well water. Additional definitions that are not included in the FDA standards of identity but are commonly seen on bottled water labels include distilled water and drinking water. Terms such as glacier water or mountain water are not standards of identity and may or may not signify that the source is as pristine as it sounds. Not all types of bottled water are regulated as a food under the FDA. Water with added carbonation, soda water, tonic water, and seltzer water are regulated as soft drinks under the FDA. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, has set strict standards for regulating public drinking water quality. The Food and Drug Administration regulates bottled water that crosses state lines, including imported bottled water, as a packaged food item and uses EPA water quality standard limits. For bottled water that does not cross state lines, regulation falls to state governments. Companies who process and package bottled water that is sold within the same state are not required to adhere to FDA regulations. While some states have well-developed bottled water programs, others do not have the resources to enact this program. The FDA regulations for bottled waters that do cross state lines include monitoring and inspecting bottled water plants. Due to a good safety record history for bottled water, these inspections often take low priority. Enforcing allowable levels of more than 70 physical and microbiological and radiological contaminants. And FDA regulations also specify standards of identity mentioned earlier. which define the various types and sources of bottled water. The FDA also requires that bottled water producers comply with its good manufacturing practices, which ensure that the production and packaging of the water takes place under sanitary conditions. Some good manufacturing practices include protection of the water source from contamination, sanitation at the bottling plant, quality control to ensure the bacteriological and chemical safety of the water, sampling and testing of source water and the final product for microbiological, chemical, and radiological contaminants, and the requirement by bottlers to maintain source approval and testing records to show government inspectors. The FDA regulates bottled water and prohibits the use of source water found to contain E. coli. If the source water does contain E. coli, the bottler must rectify or eliminate the cause of E. coli contamination of that source and keep records of such action. Under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the FDA must establish a regulation for a contaminant in bottled water when EPA establishes a new primary or health-based maximum contaminant level, or MCL, in public drinking water. FDA does not require the bottler to submit water quality results or notification of contamination issues. Due to a good safety record over the years and limited resources, bottled water operations are inspected infrequently. Companies in violation of the regulations may be subjected to more frequent inspections and water quality tests. FDA laboratories do not test individual samples for all contaminants. The bottler must have testing records to show that the bottled water meets water quality standards. To best understand if your preferred bottled water is free of contaminants, read the bottled water label or contact the bottling company and ask for the results from the most recent water quality tests. If, as a consumer, you are concerned about a particular contaminant, ask if the treatment process used to treat the water can remove that contaminant. Bottled water regulations do exist, but there is conflicting information on how often and to what extent these regulations are enforced. For example, the National Resources Defense Council, or NRDC, suggests that 60 to 70% of bottled water does not cross state lines and therefore is not regulated by the FDA. When bottled water does not cross state lines, regulations are the responsibility of the state and may or may not be the same as FDA. Within the Mid-Atlantic region, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland have bottled water regulations, while Delaware and Virginia do not have bottled water regulations for bottling companies that are not regulated by the FDA. The Environmental Working Group estimates that 48% of bottled water comes from municipal systems. If this statement is true, then nearly half of all bottled water is tested often, as required in municipal systems. Additional purification may or may not occur before bottling. Bottled water companies may choose to voluntarily subject their processes and products to additional requirements through either the International Bottled Water Association, IBWA, or National Sanitation Foundation, NSF. The IBWA is a trade organization for companies that bottle water. Membership in this organization indicates that in addition to abiding by the model code, plant inspections occur annually. IBWA suggests that 85% of bottled water companies are members of their organization. NSF certified water goes through additional testing during unannounced plant inspections that occur annually. This certification shows that the bottling company meets all FDA requirements for bottled water, including good manufacturing practices. Bottling companies participating in either of these organizations may choose to add IBWA or NSF's logo to their label to show consumers that they are undergoing additional inspections. Here's an example of a bottled water label. Consumers can draw some conclusions about bottled water by simply reading the label. FDA requires the standard of identity be present. Consumers should also look for member of IBWA or NSF on the label. Membership in these organizations indicates the bottling company goes through additional inspections or random on-site testing. More information about the water source and treatment processes may be listed on the label. The bottling company's phone number and website address should be there to provide answers for consumers about the product. This Aquafina bottled water label contains an image of mountains with the text, "Pure water, perfect taste," and the standard of identity, purified drinking water. Recall that purified drinking water refers to water that has been treated by distillation, deionization, reverse osmosis, or other suitable processes that meets the definition of purified water in the United States Pharmacopoeia, 23rd revision. Upon further inspection of the label, we see that the source of the water is from public water sources or municipal systems. The water from this source has already been treated to meet the requirements set forth by the Safe Drinking Water Act. The bottler uses a purification process that is further explained at their website. A phone number is also provided. This Deer Park label lists the standard of identity as natural spring water. According to the standards of identity, spring water is water derived from an underground formation from which water flows naturally to the surface of the earth. Spring water shall be collected only at the spring or through a borehole tapping the underground formation feeding the spring. Deer Park is known to use well water as a source, an acceptable source of spring water under FDA regulations. It's difficult to tell on this label if all of the source water comes from springs or if well water is also a source. This label does not contain any information on the treatment process used to treat this water, but a phone number is listed for consumer questions or comments. Consumers are often willing to pay more for the convenience of bottled water. The Earth Policy Institute states that bottled water may cost up to 10,000 times more than tap water. The graph on the right shows an increase in the cost and usage of bottled water since 2001. Consumption of bottled water has increased 76% since 2001. In 2011, $11.1 billion were spent on 9.1 billion gallons of bottled water. Reusable bottles of all shapes and sizes are currently available, making tap water convenient and cheaper. Also, consider that nearly half of all bottled water may originate from municipal systems or public drinking water, which is essentially tap water that has been put into a plastic bottle. While it's clear to most that the bottled water costs are significantly more per gallon than tap water, what many consumers don't consider are the environmental costs or the waste associated with the life cycle of bottled water. Virgin petroleum, an estimated 17 million barrels of oil per year, is used to make the plastic that makes up the individual water bottles. Fossil fuels are used in the filling and distribution of shipping of the product. A large amount of water is used or wasted in the manufacture of the bottles, and in some cases, tap water is treated, filtered, and then bottled, meaning that for about every 2 liters of water used results in 1 liter of water bottled. One of the most functional characteristics of bottled water is the ease of use of the single-serving bottles. Once used, they are more commonly thrown away than recycled. As of 2008, only about 31% were recycled. These easy-to-use bottles can take up to 1,000 years to biodegrade. When considering cost, it's important not to overlook the significant environmental burden that the bottling of water creates. People with weakened immune systems, such as those with HIV or AIDS, or persons undergoing chemotherapy or taking transplant medications, may want to take special precautions when considering bottled or tap water. They may be more vulnerable to microbial contaminants from certain water sources, specifically Cryptosporidium, a microscopic parasite. Crypto, for short, can occasionally be found in bottled or tap water sourced from rivers or lakes. If drinking bottled water, immuno-compromised individuals should look for water treated with reverse osmosis, distillation, or filtration to absolute 1 micron. These treatments protect against Cryptosporidium. A similar treatment method should be used for tap water as well. In summary, the information provided in this presentation gives the consumer a general understanding of the differences and similarities between bottled and tap water. Bottled water is often chosen over tap water because of its taste, perceived safety, and convenience. Rather than assume bottled water is safer, educate yourself about your options. Tap water sources include public water treatment facilities or private wells or springs. Strict standards are in place for regulating public drinking water multiple times a day. An annual water quality report informs the consumer of any violations for contaminants. Private water supplies are not regulated. The homeowner is responsible for having a certified lab test the water. Bottled water that crosses state lines is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, while bottled water that remains within a state is regulated by the state bottled water program if one exists. Regulations from state to state vary. Consumers should understand how to locate and understand the standard of identity, water source, and any association with the IBWA or NSF on the label. If information is missing or there's a concern for contamination problems, call the bottling company to ask questions about water sources and water quality tests. Bottled water costs a great deal more than tap water and creates a large amount of waste in landfills if bottles are not recycled. Nearly half of all bottled water originates from municipal systems, meaning the consumer could be paying much more for the water from the same source. Understanding these differences between tap and bottled drinking water allows consumers to make decisions based upon their knowledge of drinking water. Here are a few additional resources you can access as needed to learn more about bottled water, regulations, and water testing and interpretation. Content for this presentation was gathered from the references on the following 2 slides. Sources for each of the pictures shown in the presentation are given on this slide. Thank you for listening to this presentation on bottled water. Feel free to view additional Cooperative Extension information on this topic at this site. Thanks for your time.